So just before the video starts, I wanted to give a quick shout out to what is quite possibly the most apt sponsorship I've ever come across for Vivec. Oftentimes I'll decline, 99.9% of sponsorship deals I come across because I just don't think Raid Shadow Legends is very appropriate for the sort of content on this channel. But I know a lot of you like to fall asleep to these report videos, and that's why I thought these COZYSNUG sleep earbuds from LYTMI really are a match made in heaven for this channel and its viewers. If you're anything like me, you might struggle falling to sleep on your back with conventional earbuds in. I'd always wondered whether there were any designs that facilitated side sleeping without waking up with a perforated eardrum. Not only do these earbuds work wonders for side sleepers, they boast high quality audio, are super lightweight and soft with various different sizes of ear wings to pick and choose from, on top of having 21 hours of charge when using the charging case. So, now you can all quickly and smoothly fall asleep listening to me recount the usual litany of mind-bending, reality-shattering experiences that we all know and love. If you're interested, please check out the link in the description, and don't forget to use the discount code Vivec for 10% off your order, valid up until the 9th of December. Anyway, we'll crack on with the video now, but be sure to let me know what you thought of the earbuds if you do end up snatching yourself a pair, and thank you to LYTMI for reaching out, I really appreciate it. Beyond the Void, a DMT trip report by Vipassana meditator, posted to EARBUDS.org August 12th, 2010. I'm always interested to know the user's background before reading about his experience, so I shall briefly give mine. I am educated to postgraduate level and have a higher professional background. Around 3 years ago I began to study Buddhism and went on a number of retreats, including a Vipassana retreat. The insight from Vipassana showed me that the division between what is a drug and what is not is arbitrary and flawed, since all experience has the capacity to lead to attachment and/or aversion, and since all experience is generally perceived as pleasant or unpleasant due to a physical sensation coupled with a change in neurotransmitter levels, all experience in the physical world has a similar action to drugs. It would be completely wrong to say that Vipassana led me to drugs, rather. It showed me that my prior reasons for not experimenting with drugs were unfounded. One reason was fear of my own reactions. What I realised following Vipassana was that I need not fear any difficult drug experiences, as I would be able to observe the drug's effects, rather than acting out the script that the drug has written. The other reason was that drugs are not real. A drug experience may not be real in that it is transient and impermanent, but it is no less real than any other daily experience. Up to my completion of this Vipassana retreat, the drugs I took were limited to alcohol and tobacco. I had tried hashish a few times and cocaine once, and was quite unimpressed with both, so I felt no desire to experiment with them further. Put another way, I couldn't see what all the fuss was about. Shortly after completing Vipassana, I had my first experience with MDMA, and since then I have also experimented with MDEA, marijuana, LSD, amphetamine, nitrous oxide, methamphetamine, ketamine, psilocybin mushrooms, and salvia divinorum, as well as combinations of all of the above. But of all of these drugs, I take MDMA and LSD most frequently, at least 2 or 3 times per month and often more regularly. I occasionally smoke tobacco, I take caffeinated drinks in moderation, and rarely drink alcohol. In light of the foregoing, I think it's fair to say I've had broad experience with recreational drugs. I've never had a bad trip, even when I have taken doses of LSD that could be described as heroic. With all this, I think the most important thing I can say about DMT is that nothing, no amount or combination of drugs and no amount of description could ever have prepared me for how completely mind-blowing this substance really is. DMT divides the brain by 0, which is impossible, except with DMT. I prepared a bed of ashes in a bong by burning some tobacco. I then compacted the ashes and put a small amount of pure DMT salt on top of the ashes. I held the flame to the salt as I inhaled, making sure all of it vaporized. I held in the smoke for around 10 seconds. There was some smoke left in the bong, but as I breathed out the smoke I had inhaled, the effects of the drug had already overwhelmed my ability to move. Well, I guess I expected this. But regardless, I put the bong down, sat back in the couch, as there was nothing else I could really do in that moment. Physically, I was very aware of my body. It felt enormous, in fact. But also it seemed as if my sense of touch extended into my surroundings, my study. Everything shook and shimmered, and suddenly the visuals became something that can only be described as high-tech. Colours shone with a brilliance I had never seen. High-tech shapes that suggested intelligent design flowed over the view of everything, but unlike the phosphenes I see with LSD, which seem as if they are coming from behind my eyes, this imagery was in front of me. I was witnessing something external to my body rather than through a filter. As I turned my head, all images from different points of view combined. Past, present and future, maybe 10 seconds each way, by layer upon layer of translucent images, pulsating and animated with an intelligence that defies verbal description. Even though all colours were amplified and vivid, I noticed that there was a great deal of translucent gold and neon green colour in all of my field of vision, but again, this seemed like something I was looking at rather than tinted glasses over my eyes. I did feel a presence though. Very powerful. Some have described this presence as their former self, as in from the prior moment, and that perceiving the former self as another being, which in a way it is the explanation for this presence. I did feel this echo of myself. The self, or what we think of it as being, is of course transient and impermanent. But there was definitely something else. It seemed as if hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of beings are present, all in a hive of communication. I was aware of them, but I cannot say for certain whether they were aware of me. The intensity of everything was, in a sense, terrifying. I wasn't really scared of anything, if only because I knew that nobody has ever, at least according to any reliable source, died from smoking DMT. If I didn't know this, I might have been worried. But since I'm always well informed of the medical effects of a drug before taking it, I'm never worried. The amount of information storming my brain and the processes working were incredible, and if I were a computer, I would be afraid that my CPU would be fried as a result of overclocking. So much was happening that I might never be able to make sense of. My initial split-second neurotic reaction to the intensity was a predictable, "Oh God, I'm never doing this again." However, I knew that such thoughts always pass if I allow them to just pass, rather than clinging to them or trying to push it away. The thought arises by itself, without my input, and it will leave of its own volition. I find this quite easy to do because, well, I meditate. Furthermore, I recalled that my first reaction to salvia was similar and passed, giving way to something amazing and enlightening. I saw no reason for that not to happen with DMT. Audio was interesting. The music that was playing was both amplified and quieter all at once, which, again, is impossible except with DMT. There was a slight drop in pitch and tempo, oscillating up sometimes. Everything echoed as if the same sound came from different sources, near and far. Other sounds were also heard, but I still have no idea what they were, but I certainly did not find them objectionable. The visions I had pulsated in time to the music that was playing, although I only realised that this had happened in retrospect. Taste and smell were best not paid too much attention, if only because of the disgusting, caustic taste of the DMT smoke and its matching smell. So much is happening that it would be a great shame to allow it to detract from the experience. Like the slight nausea that can follow ingestion of psilocybin mushrooms, it really is a very small price to pay, and I am grateful for the experience rather than whining like a small child over a mildly uncomfortable side effect. A few times I did cough, not repeatedly, but one loud cough at a time. This acted as a release of some built-up energy. Not so much release of tension, but more release of an arrow from a bow, clearly directed. But also amplified the experience, and it felt as if my lungs shook the entire universe, which was a most powerful sensation indeed. As for breathing generally, I took deliberately deep breaths, if only to make sure I was breathing. I realised that this was quite unnecessary, and of course that nobody has ever choked or died from asphyxiation as a result of smoking DMT. Perhaps the fact that the past, present and future are blended together with DMT accounts for this odd sensation of not being sure of whether or not I am breathing in the first place. It's as if I became aware of my immediately prior exhalation as I'm inhaling. I think it was this, rather than the layered images, that made me realise that my sense of time was greatly stretched. I am aware of the passage of time. Perhaps I might not be so aware of it without music as a reference, but time definitely becomes more flexible. The description of the experience with reference to different senses cannot account for the intense synesthesia. I can say that I tasted music, saw colours, etc., all of which is true, but really is beyond description. During the peak effects, which lasted all of 5 to 10 minutes but felt like forever and never, all I could do was lie back into my chair and let things happen. I did not try to move much and was probably not capable of doing so. Once the peak visual effects subsided a little, I laughed inwardly for a minute before deciding to stand up and walk around. Everything shimmered and radiated, and it was as if I was moving through a gaseous formation such as a pulsar through a galaxy. I turned around and looked at my ugly, floral pattern upholstered couch, and the flowers were literally moving from one cushion to the other, and onto the floor and into the air. I could control the flow of these flowers by moving my hands. Music at this point became exceptionally pleasant, more pleasant even than music on MDMA or LSD or both. I did what I usually like to do when under the influence of psychedelics, and stare at myself in the mirror. I had a divine glow. But what I find most remarkable was that I didn't look like I was on drugs. With all other drugs, I will have a certain look that those who do not use drugs might not detect, but I will notice. But with DMT, this is not the case. As the visuals died away, a strong euphoria lingered. I shivered and clung to the wall, my body pulsating with bliss. There was almost a sense of relief, or perhaps as if I had been awarded a prize of sorts, as if I had come through a major trial successfully. Over the next 20 minutes or so, the effects of the drug wore off, leaving a wonderful afterglow. I found it difficult, however, to make sense of what had actually happened, and so decided after about half an hour to have another milder trip. This trip is not worthy of too much mention, as while intense in comparison with other substances, was nothing like the first trip and no use in integrating the first. I waited an hour and had another full dose. The effects were similar to the first trip, except more intense, and once the peak visual effects eased, it gave way to what I must say is the purest euphoria I have ever experienced. It was this trip that enabled me to make sense of the first, and allowed me to explain it here. Later on in the day, a friend called round. He was keen to try DMT, but wanted to watch how I behaved on it first. I was also intrigued to see how the trip would be different with somebody else present. I can't say there was a whole lot. His face looked very warm and friendly, and he is a very warm and friendly person, so that was hardly surprising. But it didn't fit in the alternative universe I was seeing. I had more of a sensation of flying this time than the previous 3 times. Unfortunately for readers, whatever I was flying through really defies description, except I felt a very strong presence of intelligence and numerous beings of unknown nature. As I was coming to, my friend took a dose. He seemed very shocked by the effects of the drug as he came to. He said that he would probably not take DMT again, not because it was bad, but simply too weird. Interestingly though, he found the music playing, and the few words I spoke, nothing significant, very raw and almost grating. Like myself, he practices Vipassana and said that had he not been on a Vipassana retreat, the experience would have been disastrous and would have scarred him. Predictably, 15 minutes after saying this, he said he would definitely have to try DMT again. He noted that he felt a calm like he had never felt. I asked him if this was like a system reset of sorts, or perhaps a clean installation of a new operating system, and he agreed with the analogy. I expected that this might be his reaction, similar to the reaction of most people I have seen taking salvia for the first time. Terror or near terror, followed by great joy and a desire to repeat the experience. The next day in the evening, I took another dose. I asked my wife, who was not taking DMT or any substances, if she would try to interact with me or at least observe while I was under the influence. I wasn't really able to communicate with her, but what I noticed is that the beings I encountered had similar features to her. By features, I do not necessarily mean physical features. All I noted was that she belonged among the beings whose presence I felt. The beings were aware of her, and it was as if a part of her that is deep in her subconsciousness was fully aware of them also. On that note, this was the first time the unknown being seemed aware of me and took notice. I have yet to establish the full significance of all this. I might be able to once she takes DMT herself, but she is not ready for it. This does corroborate the aforementioned view that one of the explanations for the sensation of a strong presence during a DMT trip is an echo of the self, perceived as a separate entity. As already stated, I do not accept this as a complete explanation, and I do hold to the view that the beings I encountered were more than simply me in the past, present, and future. Given what I noticed of my wife communicating with the DMT universe beings, it strengthens my view that our intelligence, awareness, and power as human beings is in several parts and none of the parts are aware of the other. DMT has opened up a part that what I typically see as me was unaware of, and it likewise of me. It would seem that the goal of a meditator and/or psychonaut should be to integrate these several parts so that there is continuity of awareness and intelligence. The most significant integrable effect of the trip was that it had made me quite unafraid of dying. I don't want to die, but I feel as if I can make good choices after my death. I cannot fully explain in words why I feel this. DMT strongly reinforced the truth that there is nothing to fear except fear itself. There is a concept in Buddhism, but by no means unique to that tradition, called shunyata, that is best translated as emptiness. Meditation, especially Vipassana in a Theravedic tradition, and drugs other than DMT can take me into shunyata, into the void as it were. LSD can certainly help me to empty my mind to the point where I have no thought, only awareness. Ketamine, nitrous oxide, and especially salvia take me much further into the void, to the vanishing point of the universe where everything is perceived as empty, and that the universe is the modulation of a single oscillating wave that has no permanent or physical reality. Tibetan Buddhists, however, seem to suggest that while a student must attain this understanding of shunyata, that there is something beyond shunyata as well. I cannot claim to have an understanding of what Tibetans mean by this, if this is what they were saying at all. But I can say that with DMT, I am taken beyond the void, beyond emptiness. I'm always one to spot puns, but while no more than a coincidence, the sound of the letters DMT seems so apt. Vipassana, LSD, and dissociatives emptied my mind. DMT has de-emptied it. By this, though, I do not mean it has undone anything. It seems that when I reach the void, I come to the vanishing point of the universe. DMT allows me to push beyond this vanishing point, allowing me to see another universe that actually coexists with this one and is right under our noses. I had always thought that I might leave the material world behind to pursue a monastic life, or at least go and live in the Himalayas for a few years. Having had DMT, I no longer consider this necessary, as there is nothing to leave, and wherever I go in this world would not take me further to this new truth I have seen, which is right under our noses wherever we go. Of all the effects of DMT, this is so far the most liberating. Subtle flashbacks have followed this experience. I've experienced several in the past few days, not at all difficult, unpleasant, distracting, or overwhelming, I might say, which for me have helped significantly with integration. I want to take the experience of DMT further by undergoing a full ayahuasca ritual, as I am certain that this will make the experience easier to integrate. The reason DMT is so difficult to make sense of is, of course, because it hits you out of nowhere and vanishes just as quickly. Until such time as I have the opportunity to take part in an ayahuasca ritual, I intend to slowly experiment with combining DMT with other substances, especially LSD and MDMA, and perhaps in time with dissociatives as well. I expect that I will take a long time to do this though, as it is certainly not something to be rushed into whatsoever. DMT is, by a long shot, the most powerful drug, at least as far as the mind is concerned, that I have tried. Indeed, the power of all other drugs combined is completely insignificant compared to the power of DMT. though it is true that a difficult trip on DMT might be easier than, say, LSD, in that if something becomes uncomfortable, I need only endure it for 5 minutes as opposed to a grueling 8 hours. But anyway, I shall close here by saluting the first shamans who discovered DMT-containing plants and dared to experiment and voyage into the unknown. Their bravery, or recklessness, or both, has been for the benefit of mankind. One little tidbit I'd like to comment on this report. I watched this video of a day on Jesse Michaels' channel. Excellent channel covering UFOs primarily, but also sort of a paranormal look into science, going beyond the material plane of science. He's a very versatile thinker. I really respect him. He's probably got my favourite YouTube channel of all time, and he had Graham Hancock on recently. And in that interview, they briefly discussed the fact that is it the Johns Hopkins University, I believe? There are universities that are studying these common threads in DMT experiences, and they're trying to basically put people into DMT states that last longer than the regular DMT duration, because obviously the duration of a DMT experience is quite, well, it's significantly less than the other psychedelics like LSD and even mushrooms. Whereas, say, ayahuasca, which obviously DMT is present in, that experience goes on for much, much, much longer, hours. And for science to really examine what's going on in the brain and what's going on with these entities, what's going on with the multiverse, what's going on with aliens and sentient beings that aren't necessarily physical, which science has a duty to explore because this is something that people are literally directly experiencing and corroborating. There's clearly there's clearly a lot of empirical evidence to suggest that people are going to these same places or similar places and having very similar experiences and sharing them and matching them up in a pattern. We know science loves its patterns. And he made a really great point that, yes, if we can induce a prolonged DMT state for people who are very, very much safe to go into these and are ready to explore these other states, we can really start to understand what's going on with these entities, commune with them more, and figure out what is actually going on. There's a big debate, isn't there, in the psychonaut field? Is it a projection of the self? This guy in this report even touched upon that. Is it some projection of yourself? Are you literally the entity, but in a different form? Is it because we're all one? Is it because we're non-dual? Or even regardless of whatever the substrate of reality is, does DMT allow us to see what's always there? Are the entities always around us? How does this tie into aliens? Very fascinating stuff, and I highly recommend you check out the interview of Graham Hancock. I think Graham Hancock and Jesse Michaels are two wonderfully fascinating, intelligent, beautiful people who you can clearly tell have a great love, compassion, and deep interest in the fantastically surreal state of what it means to be a human and just the paradoxical madness and intricate, complicated web of the universe and life itself. So yeah, highly recommend that, and thank you for watching. And yes, we're in November now, which means more glowing experiences, lots more happy reports and reports that come out like this, where obviously there was a bit of challenge in this report. Oftentimes the mystical experiences, there are going to be some challenges. It's a challenge to rid your ego. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. Some trips, I think when people say, oh, can you please cover more positive trips, they just want literally like the trip reports I've covered where it's like, oh, a really wholesome AMT experience where they just literally take it and it's just fun and laughter and having a good time all night and smiles and good times and etc. And yeah, they're very positive experiences, but really for me the most glowing experiences and the most transcendent ones are where you'd go on a journey, where you go on a trip and you come out the other end with deep insights learned and a great basis for integrating the experience into becoming a better human being. So yeah, thank you for watching / listening. Always appreciate you guys, and I hope you had a happy Halloween.